Welcome to the Wealth is in the Details podcast. In this podcast, financial planner Peter Raskin helps families and business owners understand and prepare for their wealth journey. Along the way, thoughtful and detailed planning can provide clarity and confidence as clients confront a multitude of financial decisions. Listen in as Peter shares stories and insight into people's wealth journeys. Now, let's get into today's podcast.
Hello and welcome to Wealth is in the Details with Peter Raskin from Raskin Planning Group. Peter, it's so good to get back with you again.
It is. Thanks for speaking with me. This is great.
Oh, well, thanks for letting me be on the podcast. I learned so much from you, and I'm excited. It's interesting because you've actually touched on this subject a little bit before, and it was the title of your podcast today is 5 Reasons to Have a Long-Term Care Contingency Plan. Like I said, you've touched on it in the past, but it has been a while. I mean, it was probably 50 to 60 episodes ago. So why are you bringing this back up now?
Great question. Back in it was all the way back in 2019. I think it was episode 11, contingency planning and retirement in long-term care. So it's a similar conversation, and we've had many other discussions about healthcare in general. Just as such a vital, important topic for families. But this is, to me, such a vital, important topic that we just need to keep on addressing. I just don't think most families have addressed the planning issue, and I think it's vital they do so. I suspect, unfortunately, this will be an evergreen topic, like tax planning and investment planning, that planners like me are just going to keep on talking to our clients about. It's that important.
Yeah, and I know there's a ton of different directions that this conversation could go, but what's today's focus?
Yeah, well, I'm anxious for our society and frankly for the families we serve. And I just use this as an example. I was at a gathering of high school and college friends over the weekend. So these are people I've known forever, and the 10 of us are all about, basically we're all the same age. They're all really good friends, and I describe all of us as affluent. We've all done well, frankly, and hardworking professionals and business owners, and we all have different backgrounds and circumstances, but we've all done it, and it feels great. We all have kids. Some of us are married, some are divorced. And we're all still working. But we're right there at retirement. We're X amount of years. Some of us are that may happen sooner than later. Others of us will keep on working for a while because we want to. But here's my point: we've all had some experience with aging parents and grandparents, and chronic diseases like Alzheimer's, dementia, pulmonary disease, heart disease, cancer, accidents like falls. And we've all in some way been involved in management of their care, which is just amazing to me. So 10 people in the room, all of us have had this experience. And, some of us, it's been short-term care, and others it's been a really long time, like 10 years plus. Just as an example, during this gathering, 2 of my friends were currently managing their parents' care. Right as we're having fun, they're concerned about their parents. One friend's mother had fallen, and she was trying to arrange care for her at her independent living facility, which is a fairly expensive continuing care community in the Boston area. She said a couple times how lucky she was and her mom was that her father, who's passed many years, but he'd accumulated enough to provide for his surviving wife in the way that she would make her comfortable. The other friend was dealing with both parents living in a state hours away by plane, and both parents are currently needing 24-hour home health care. And at the last minute, this was that morning, the home health aides that they'd hired couldn't show up. So she was on the phone for hours trying to arrange the care. And it was stressful and difficult, and she was scared because of her parents' situation. Fortunately, it all worked out, and that's good. And then, just as I'm thinking about this, I was at another dinner the last week with two other friends, and both of them were currently managing care for their mother and their mother-in-law. So it's just, and that's why I felt like this was an important conversation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And just because of our conversations before, it sounds to me like you're talking about custodial care, not just medical care, because it's more involved.
It really is. I'd expect that everyone has experienced healthcare in their world, but we are talking about custodial care, and that's really, is get right down to it. It's helping people with activities of daily living, which as defined by Congress is transferring, toileting, eating, dressing, bathing, and continence. And it was a shock to me that 10 out of 10 and had this experience in the past, and really 2 out of the 10 were currently dealing with these issues, and then my 2 other friends were dealing with it as well. So the demographics of suggest that these issues are becoming a really such a great burden for baby boomers as baby boomers age, and the medical care is keeping people alive longer, so there's just more susceptible to these kind of custodial issues. I also believe that the cost and the complexity of finding caregivers is just going to get worse. Finding appropriate caregivers is hard, and it's getting harder, and wages I think are going to go up. I think that there's a lack of appropriate facilities in many places across the U.S. Some places have plenty, and others just don't have enough, and I think that's going to drive up costs as well.
Peter, those are incredibly important questions, and I mean, I got to be honest, it's really hard to think about those, and it's kind of depressing. I mean, the entire issue is kind of depressing, thinking about your parents aging, thinking about struggles, and then of course finances. How many people that you speak with really want to have these discussions with you?
Yeah, I think this is a bigger problem. I think it's really a societal problem that we just need to confront and at least deal with. How does our society, our communities treat those in need? And I'm not necessarily talking about those in financial need, although there are certainly many of those, but I'm talking about those that are vulnerable and that just need care. How do we treat them? Who's going to pay for this care? We aren't coming up with that solution today, but I do believe that each family needs to answer these questions for themselves. How do we basically want to be treated if and when we're unable to care for ourselves? And then there's that second question we need to answer is, how will that care be paid for?
Yeah. I mean, this is such a challenging question for every family out there.
It is. And I certainly agree. And this is the challenge planners have, is the important issues that are hard to talk about, especially with those clients that haven't had personal experience with the issues. And here I'm talking about younger clients in their 40s and 50s. And, that's a time that they need to be planning and thinking about it, frankly. Our clients who are in their 40s and 50s, they just seem to think there are more pressing priorities. And, maybe they're right because they've got a lot of things on their plate too. However, it's actually pretty likely that our spouse or our kids or some other relative will somehow need to be involved in our custodial care at some point in our life. And with that in mind, what I'm talking today about is really talking about those 5 reasons we should all develop a long-term care contingency plan. And it's basically just sitting down, maybe with a planner, and thinking about things, asking questions. So I'm going to spend a few minutes really mapping out those 5 questions that they need to really ask themselves or consider. So the first is really, and these are comments as well, but just thoughts, it can happen to anyone. And it really isn't about choice. I think it's an important thing to think about. I hear this from clients all the time, that it probably won't happen to me. And I thought it would be good to unpack that a bit. So, I think the tendency to think it won't happen to me comes from being a human being, and we tend to be an optimistic species. there's such a thing called optimism bias. And this refers to our tendency to overestimate our likelihood of experiencing positive events and underestimating our likelihood of experiencing negative events. We have a bias in thinking without really any evidence that bad things won't happen to us. They may happen to other people, but they don't happen to us. And even when we're confronted with actual evidence, we often discount that evidence and assume it just won't happen. And here I'm thinking about all the statistics about long-term care and how long we might need it and when we might need it. I find that that's not really a compelling reason for people. We think we can control all aspects of our health and our physical body better than other people. And, because I exercise, I eat right, and this will protect me. But it's not that easy. And another example is that people think that because my parents, not my parents, but our clients' parents who we speak to, because they had a certain experience, they might have died suddenly, didn't need custodial care, and that's how I want to go. Therefore, I don't need to think about it. Well, family history and genetic makeup plays a role in how you age and your experience, but there's not necessarily the case. But because your parents did or didn't experience something, that doesn't mean you will. Or some people say, I'd never let myself become a burden. I'll end my own suffering. I hear that a lot, frankly.
Wow, that's kind of morbid.
It is morbid, and I think I know where that comes from. But that may not be possible. It depends upon your specific situation. First, do you live in a state that allows it? Do they allow assisted suicide? Will your family agree to it? Will you be cognitively able to make that kind of decision when the time comes? So it's a lot easier said than actually done. Yeah. So it happens to anyone, and it isn't our choice is number one. The second reason we need a long-term care plan of some sort, it's much more expensive than we think. Just people underestimate the cost of care. And here are some facts, whether people are going to believe me or not, it's really expensive. And there's a wide range of costs depending upon the kind of care someone needs. Will you need 24-hour-a-day care? Do you need someone coming in for a few hours a day or a week? Do you need to be in a facility of some sort, like a nursing home or assisted living? In Massachusetts, and we're not that different than the other parts of the country, maybe a little bit more expensive, but the average cost is more than $6,000 to $12,000 per month for facility care. Assisted living might be a little bit less than nursing home care, but that's a lot of money if you annualize it, even on a monthly basis. And then 24-hour-a-day care at home can even be more expensive. It's really something. So because it's so expensive, the question that we often ask is, have you modeled these potential costs in your plan? How long might care be necessary? Where will the funds come from to pay for that care? Is it going to come from taxable retirement accounts? Will stocks or bonds need to be liquidated? And will there be additional tax costs or transaction costs, like capital gains? And then how will your survivors fare if your estate is reduced by $100,000, $250,000, $500,000? And are you and they, is everyone okay with that expense? So, one consideration when we think about costs is just consider transferring that potential financial cost to an insurance company, if possible. I always think about insurance in terms of big mistake, little mistake. I think I've probably mentioned that in past podcasts. Premiums are the little mistake. It's a known expense that I can budget and afford. But the potential cost of long-term care in the magnitude of, hundreds of thousands of dollars is the big mistake. And if me and my family are perfectly okay assuming that big mistake expense, then maybe I don't need to worry about the insuring it, which is fine. You need to be thoughtful about it. So it's really about talking about this use of money decision. What's my family's best use of money? So reason number 3, it's really hard work being a caregiver. So if you need care, someone might be there for you, but is your loved one up for that task? Is that what they want? Is that what you want? Providing care for an aging spouse or a parent, it's just physically difficult and emotionally draining. It really is. Not that it can't be done, and people can do it wonderfully, but again, is that what you want? Do you really want your spouse or waking up in the middle of the night, caring for you, helping you bathe, keeping you physically safe, lifting you? Does your spouse or child have those skills? You have to learn how to do these things, especially the lifting and the physical aspects of it. If your kids have families and careers of their own, how will your needs affect them? Will you need to move in with them? And how is that going to affect their family life? And since we don't know what your future, your long-term care needs might be, it's really impossible to answer all of these questions. But one thing I feel really strongly about is that you have to have these discussions with your family, with your spouse, with your kids, with the people that you think might be willing to be there for you, and let them know what your wishes and desires are. How you want to be treated, where you want to be treated. Is it at home or in a facility? Do you want to absolutely stay in your hometown or near your community, or would you be willing to move to another part of the country? So these are really important discussions to have. And I think one needs to be realistic about how hard it is and how your situation may be difficult to care for someone in your home. Is your current bedroom on the second floor? Can you put in a lift to go from the first to the second floor? Are the bathrooms usable for someone that might need assistance toileting and bathing? So it's not that you need to have a solution to all these questions, but I think it's worth questioning and asking, are these issues for you? So it's not that, I think that these questions should be thought about years in advance, because if you have a plan, where you want to be, when you want it to happen, I think people are going to be able to get the care they need, but it's about having that plan.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, Peter, because my wife and I've had this discussion, and it was actually sparked by one of the podcasts you and I did a while back. And we had talked about long-term just briefly. I think you just actually mentioned it, but it brought it back to my mind, and we were talking about it. And my wife is Hispanic. And one of the things that she said is, look, in the Hispanic families, we take care of our own. They're not moving into a facility. Nobody's going to move into a facility if my mom or dad need help and So she had this idea in her head that that's what it should be like, which I agree. If you have family that can take care of a loved one, that's perfect. However, she's basing that off of what she saw when she grew up, which was, God bless her, 30 some odd years ago, 35 years ago, when she was that young to see that kind of family interaction. People were still stay-at-home moms. People were still able to help provide services. My wife and I both work outside the home, and I had to talk to her about that. I was like, you do understand that, today is different. And as much as families want to be able to help take care of family members, you also have to be able to pay the bills. And so if two of us are working, who's going to be there to take care of mom or dad, or my mom or dad? Because we talked about my parents as well. And so it was kind of an eye-opening discussion to have, because she thought, well, yeah, you're kind of right. And then of course I said, and you also still want to be able to spoil the grandkids, and that also takes money. So what are we going to do? And then, then she's like, oh, wait a second. So, but it's without having that discussion, just like you said, and starting to talk about a plan, you don't know. And you have no idea the true cost mentally, physically, and all that, that it's going to take a toll on the family altogether. Not that you don't love them just as much. It's just, you're probably loving them more by making sure they're taken care of by a professional or taken care of in a professional facility. So I think that's great. And I didn't mean to interrupt. I know you're on number 4, but I just thought it was very interesting because I know people's mindsets can kind of get stuck, right? Thinking, oh, I need to take care of them. Well, can you?
Yeah, I think these are just the conversations to have, to be honest and frank about what it might look like. We don't know how it's going to play out, but just, think about it. How is that going to take place? And then number 4, the reason to have a plan is because the sooner you develop a plan, the better off everyone is. Don't wait until it's too late to make these decisions, and to frame the problems, to come up with some sort of solution. So the other thing I think is important around this is make decisions today that are going to give you pleasure now, not just in 20 years. So just as an example, if you live in an older home that needs lots of ongoing maintenance, and while you've enjoyed doing it, maybe it's getting time to get off those ladders, not worry about fixing and maintaining all the time. And maybe a newer home will allow you and your spouse to stay at home for longer, just be more flexible for everyone, and comfortable, and allow for kids and grandkids to visit. So it's just thinking ahead. If you're making a move to another part of the country, how's the healthcare in that location? Are there facilities that could be utilized? If you're up in the New England area, if you're moving up to northern Maine, which is beautiful and wonderful, that comes at a risk. There aren't the healthcare facilities right nearby compared to the way they are right around the Boston area. So just think about those things. And then finally, understand how the modeling and financial piece of long-term care fits in. So based on your discussion, how do we pay for this if that happens? If you opt for insurance, the younger you are, the more likely you'll be able to get it because you may be in good health, and also the less expensive it is. So these are just considerations about doing this kind of planning sooner than later. And then finally, the most important reason is because you love someone. It isn't that the most important reason you plan. You care for your spouse, your kids, your cousins. So you just want to be, you don't want to be a burden, and you want to be thoughtful. And I know this sounds tough, but ask that question of yourself. What will the people I love say about me, if and when I need care or assistance? Will they say that I really thought ahead? I thought about them. I not only thought about myself, which is important, but I thought about them. So I think it's vital to have these conversations with others as well as yourself. So, and I think by doing this, you're going to get closer to meeting your personal care objectives. I think just, to me, you have a plan, you're more likely to be successful in anything.
Okay, so let's talk about that plan, because these are 5 really, really important reasons. But how exactly do you plan for long-term care?
Well, I think the first thing you can do is educate yourself. So, understand the difference between custodial care versus medical care. Understand what insurance pays for and what they don't. They typically don't pay for a lot of custodial care. Medicare doesn't either. So it's an important distinction. And then think about the conditions that might cause a need for custodial care. Now, it may be obvious to you and to me because we've experienced it, but many people haven't. So I think, look and talk to people, caregivers, families that have provided care, what's their experience, from both a care perspective and from a financial perspective. I don't think you need to do deep research here, but get a sense of what these issues are. Talk to professional caregivers, ask them what they see, understand the potential solutions to certain problems. You don't need to become an expert, but I think you need to familiarize yourself with possible solutions, the big picture stuff. And finally, I think your financial planner should be able to answer a lot of questions, should really be able to frame what some of these issues are. So that's the number one thing: educate yourself. Secondly, I being a numbers guy, being a financial planner, I think financial modeling should be something we do as part of our plan. So think about modeling these contingency issues, that make sense for you and your family, and how do these solutions affect your finances, both your own personal and then your survivors. And then third, if you do that kind of modeling, and you want to take a look at the insurance side of these plans, take a look at the costs and the benefits. Maybe that insurance solution can meet your needs. This conversation is not about the specific solution to insurance, but I think it's just an important thing to consider. There are lots of options today. And again, your financial planner should be able to show you options and discuss costs and benefits with you.
Yeah. And again, there's so many unknowns in just the discussion that we've had so far. Nobody knows. I mean, again, if we all had a crystal ball, this would be much easier and you'd be out of a job. But bottom line is we don't, right? And it's obviously it's a very thoughtful thing to plan around, long-term care. And in my opinion, I'm sure that you would back me up on this, it's going to be really beneficial, right? It's absolutely be beneficial to plan. It just seems so hard to do. And I have a small confession. My wife and I had that discussion a couple months ago, and we've done nothing so far about it. We didn't do a plan. We just talked about it and kind of left it after our dinner discussion or whatever it was. We just kind of left it there. And, maybe I didn't prioritize it enough. There's always something else. There's work, family, there's vacation. There's lots of things, taxes, investment planning. All those seem to be more important than this and more of an immediate discussion to have.
On a scale of 1 to 10, based upon your age and your circumstance, maybe those are the priorities that need to be addressed then. So I'm not trying to say everything needs to be addressed right now, that this is the most important thing that everyone needs to address, but it should be on your list. And I think that's the planner's challenge. And that's why, frankly, I recommend that people work with a professional, someone that can keep these important issues on your planning list. Just every year, every 6 months, however long you're talking to them, get the priorities and then work through the list. And it's going to be a list that never ends. I hate to tell you that, but there's always something. If you can't get to it in 2021, well, let's recover from this global pandemic. Let's do all the things that you want to do in 21, and then let's pick it up again in 22. Your planner is going to keep it as a priority. Sometimes it's hard to do without that third party because, again, priorities get in the way. But remember, we just can't do everything at the same time. And the goal is to keep moving forward. Do as the best we can with what we have, time we have, the money we have, the resources, and then focus on your family, focus on the things that give you pleasure, and that's vital too. So mental health is just as important as financial health. So keep it on the list.
Well, it's funny because my wife has a honey-do list for me, right? And so I think what I'm going to do, Peter, is I'm going to make a honey we do list, and this needs to go on it, right? Something that we both need to address and do, and not avoid the topic, not like either one of us has so far, but it is a touchy subject. And so that's something that we need to just buckle down and do. So thank you so much for the reminder. And since I do speak to you about on a weekly basis at this point, keep reminding me, would you? All right, Peter, thank you so much. Another great podcast, great information. I know the audience appreciates it, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric. It was great chatting about it. And I'm sure we'll be talking about this topic and its related issues in the future.
All right. Thanks again, Peter. And of course, our last thank you goes to the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Wealth is in the Details podcast with Peter Raskin. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Peter comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Raskin Planning Group, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth is in the Details podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Lincoln Financial Advisors Corporation. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Peter Raskin is a registered representative of Lincoln Financial Advisors. Securities offered through Lincoln Financial Advisors Corporation, a broker, dealer, member SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through SageMark Consulting, a division of Lincoln Financial Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Insurance offered through Lincoln affiliates and other fine companies. Raskin Planning Group is not an affiliate of Lincoln Financial Advisors. Lincoln Financial Advisors Corporation and its representatives do not provide legal or tax advice. You may want to consult a legal or tax advisor regarding any legal or tax information as it relates to your personal circumstances.